Hey, it's Craig from Beers and we're at the Sophia Aquarium Museum. I'm going to have to work on my pronunciation, but the aquarium is all the way down here. It's really a cool installation and it's only a couple of years old, so come and find out what's going on. Let's take a look.
So good morning everyone, thanks for joining again, and we are here from Sweden in Gothenburg, the aquarium in the Sjöfartsmuseet, which is the marine museum here in Gothenburg, which definitely is a very good location to check out. So the museum is fantastic. They're having a special event right now from a filmmaker, Katharina. She went close up with all those different sharks, and not the sharks that you're usually seeing, but the Greenland shark, for example. So she went diving where it's really cold and very beautiful, fantastic sceneries. So if you get the chance to go to Sweden, check out that. The museum itself had an aquarium already in the past, and that had been closed 4 years ago, and then they took all the animals out and into storage. And then they built, what you've seen in the intro is the front yard or the lawn in front of the museum. They dug a giant hole, went through all the, the rocks and everything, and built a giant basement. And this is where the aquarium now actually is. So as you're walking in, you're coming down these stairs, and now we're basically underneath the front lawn, you could say, from the aquarium, and it all starts with the pelagic zone. So the aquarium is not gigantic, but I think the displays are done really well. This might be very dark, so I don't know what the camera will make out of it. So this is like the deep sea area, so you'll see some species that you'll rather find very low in the water column. The entrance room is like for receptions. There's also a big area for schools here in Gothenburg that use that as a lab for their bio class, basically. So here's the horseshoe crabs, one of the living fossils. Yeah, and now we're gonna check out the lab. So this is an exhibition place, beautifully done with some projection screens. And this is the lab. So this is where the high schools, basically from Gothenburg, use this space on a regular basis to do the biological class. They have some test aquariums. It's called the Ocean Lab. And the students can then work on those tanks. So they're separated from the main water supply, of course, so nothing can happen to the animals on display. But I think it's a fantastic idea and it's beautifully done. So you can work on these aquariums from the rear, and this front is behind glass, so you can have a very silent room if you need that for doing your classes. Full lab equipment, anything you need. The aquarium right now is still closed for our conference. There's the sponsor board. Yeah, and this is basically the classroom. So giant sink over there, so people can play around in the aquariums. This is a display of basically the tide pools that you will find on the coast here. So just the standard animals you will see when you go to the beach here. So some crabs and sea stars, the usual suspects. So in front of the Ocean Lab, you'll have some explanatory screens, displays here, digitally done with a projector, which looks really awesome. So it's explaining a little bit about our watery planet, and then the flow of the oceans and the Gulf Stream and the giant water movement, and where you find which animals and which biological habitat. Super nicely done. Given that the space in this aquarium is not that big, it's a pretty good way of explaining what's happening in and around our oceans. Here's the last display I find fascinating. On the first glance you will not be able to understand what it is, but it actually shows a beach with all of this plastic debris floating on that coastal zone. And that's exactly what I saw when I was on vacation in Curacao a couple of years ago with the family and our friends, and within half an hour we collected a full trunk of our car full of plastic debris. Just a tiny help, but I thought it was a good practice with the kids to explain why they shouldn't toss plastic anywhere, because that's basically what you're going to see when you go to some remote islands. But a very nice display, and that's explaining pretty much everything of the oceans. Very good use of that open space. The centerpiece right here is all those small aquariums. They're all serviced from behind, as you just saw. So here we're at the seagrass meadows. A lot of different habitats you'll find in and around the coast here. And I mean, some beautiful fish that you'll see in those seagrass when you're diving, which I usually did in the Baltic Sea a lot, close to Denmark. If you pay enough attention, you'll always find sea needles hiding in the seagrass beautifully. And as you see, the back wall of some of the tanks is actually lit. Yeah, it gives you a totally different impression. Here you have rock wall, so basically the lower area of the coastline, and that's what you will find down there. And I'm not going to show you the big tank yet. We'll start with the mangrove area. So here in this tank, you see the rear interestingly backlit, and I think that's a really cool effect. So you see some corals, and then the whole tank moves up to the coastline, and this is then where the mangrove start. Just to explain that to the visitors, what it will look like underwater when that reef switches over to the mangrove area. Here you'll see a lagoon, so that's more or less what we will see in the reef tanks. Again, nice backlit. Totally different effect, but I really love it. Looks fantastic for those animals to show them. And I should have done that maybe instead of having a black wall. But let me know in the comments what you prefer. But I think it's a really nice effect. The coral roof, basically the reef flat, and that tank is explaining how that reef building of the corals actually work. So on the top you'll see thriving corals, beautifully done, just where the water line ends basically. And then anything that is falling down is just adding to the reef structure. That's a really well done explanation. And the next system, you'll have the lower part of the reef where there's no more light to keep the big corals alive. So that's all the species you'll see in the lower part of the reef. Here's the wonderful kelp tank that's actually powered by some flow cannons. And when you come here, you'll have seasonal difference in the tank. So you'll notice if you come here in winter that the kelp is almost gone and there's less algae, as they're changing the light cycle for this as well. But then in the late summer, the whole tank will be completely filled with natural kelp, and also all the rock work will be overgrown by red and green algae. It looks fantastic and one of the nicest displays of kelp I've seen. There's another North Sea tank. So this is basically the coastal area of the North Sea right in front of Sweden. And of course, some of those animals you'll also see in Kattegat and Skagerrak. So that crossover to the Baltic Sea. So you'll see some Atlantic cod and pollack, the big animals that you'll always find also on your plate when you're in the coastal regions. And I know that Claude would just be giving me some recipes now for these fish. This tank is powered by two AFC 150s, and the whole aquarium is built in a very, very energy saving way, as you'll see behind the scenes. Really, really cool tank. Yeah, and then you have the massive centerpiece aquarium, which is 440 cubic meter reef tank, so 110,000 gallons for you guys out there that are working in Imperial. And it's a reef tank that has been now up for 2.5 years, I would say, with some starting issues due to some impurities in the salt that they used initially. Unfortunate, but now they get things going and they changed some of the lighting. You'll notice the front looks a bit more blue than the rear, and this is the lights that have been exchanged already. But we're talking about a water depth of almost exactly 5 meters, so 15 feet. And you'll see there's also some black tips here in this tank. And all the corals are starting to grow really, really well. I was here a year ago. The corals were just starting, and now you can see that there's growth tips on all the Montipora and Tubinaria and Milka. Looks really, really nice. And I think within the next 2 years, this will be a massive, massive coral coverage on this tank. So this is the short side of the tank. You'll see some nice current up here. So the water is being pushed from the lower corner behind this ledge, and then up to the tank. And there's some more flow cannons right here that are pushing the water around, and they're all randomly set, so you'll have some nice current changes. And all the way in the far corner there's a big AFC 1200 that's blowing the water diagonally up in the tank, so all the detritus is lifted, and basically runs very good. And you'll see all the fungia down there. So we're talking about 15 feet, and there's enough fungia sitting here in the water, and they're all doing fantastic. Can't show you the front of the aquarium right now because there's still our group from the conference sitting, but I'll try to get a sneak peek behind the scenes here. We're now behind the sidewall of that big 440 cubic meter coral reef tank. And first we'll check out the lower area. I know many of you know the brand, especially the visitors from the US. You'll notice there's an MRC skimmer standing here, so greetings to Raj. Yeah, that's a very unusual brand to see in Europe, but yeah, they obviously just delivered what the Schifffahrtsmuseet needed, and we had this little additional project. So after 2 years now, they would really like to have our pumps on all of their systems, and guess what? There's an A1200 now running on this skimmer. That's a test run right now, so that's why the plumbing is not ideal with the 290s in there, but that's just because our pump is just the opposite of the original pump. So ours has the outlet on the left side and the original MRC pump has the outlet on the right side. But there you see A1200 is doing the same job, and it does that actually with 50% less of the energy. I think it's 40%. Yeah, so that really helps the aquarium, and they have a lot of abyss installed here. And if you see the top of the skimmers, you don't really see a difference in what the skimmers are doing. So I think that came out quite nice. And the aquarium will monitor this for the next year or so, and then we'll see how everything is going. Another very nice appliance that we'll find here is something tiny. And I know it will look weird, but check this out. So that's an A100, and it's actually delivering seawater to all the aquariums behind the scenes on this level. So the aquarium is all in that below ground level, and any auto top-off system is running from that A100. So it's pressure controlled and permanently pressurizes the supply line. So all these tanks, holding tanks basically for corals and live rock and algae, they are all fed by tiny pumps like that. So guys, just follow me along as we'll go up and have a look at the reef tank from the top. I hope my camera still does that with the temperature. So I'll just turn you around and give you that nice view here from that little step. So this is the 440 cubic meter tank from the top. Again, you'll notice the lights back here are much more blue than the ones right there, but that's going to be changed in the future as the corals grow. Flow is being generated by an AFC 1200 down here, pushing the water up in a 30-degree angle. And then there's one more AFC 400, and then there's two more AFC 400s and another AFC 400 down there. And that mixes up the water quite good. But you know that when the corals start to grow, you will have to add more flow into the tank. The corals just demand it as they grow. But for now, it looks really nice. Well, and then of course there's a boat to do repairs on the lamps if needed. And this was the Frag a Coral workshop that they did last week during the conference. A little bit of fish breeding going on in here. Then there's also preparation to do sexual reproduction in here, so that's why those lids can be closed. And then of course you'll have anything you'll find behind a large coral tank. So there's always fish and coral growing here, being fragged, taking frags out. Massive tank. It's easily 32 degrees Celsius up here, so I won't stay here too long as there's no drinks being served. But yeah, that was our tropical bar 2 nights ago when we had the icebreaker evening. Very nice how you can see the current on top of that just moving across that ledge right there and then being hit by the other pump. Yeah, beautiful scenery. A lot of lights, but that's what you need when you have a 5-meter deep tank. And as you notice, all the fungias on the ground, they're really doing well. So I just wanted to give you a quick picture here from the top of the North Sea tank. So just so you can see how big that tank really is. It looks quite empty, but there's some big fish in there and only very little lighting, as that's what you're going to see in the North Sea. But the real cool thing is that kelp tank, and you can see how much water movement is going on in there. So that's 2 AFC 400s and 1 AFC 150 doing all of this, placed in various places, and only one you can barely see. The rest is really well hidden in that theming. Just springtime right now here. The kelp is not undergoing the full lighting, so the lighting cycle actually changes with the seasons, so you will have that seasonal change in the pool as well. Yeah, once the kelp is growing back and growing all over the place, you're really seeing the kelp being pushed into the wall and then drawn away from the wall. There's really nice movement here, fantastic scenery. And then of course in the North Sea tank you'll have 2 AFC 150s, so whenever people ask how big does my tank have to be, well, this is technically the answer. If you don't want to keep corals but just give fish a little workout, use 2 of those in a, I would guess it's at least 40 cubics tank. That'll work fine. So now the workshop right here is done and we'll be able to see the tank in its full beauty from the front. So let's get a little bit closer. And you know, you have a big aquarium when a 10mm wide angle lens doesn't catch the whole size of the aquarium and you have to move to a corner to see all of the tank. So the rear is being kept clean in deep blue, could be a bit darker, but I think it shows pretty well what it looks like when you are at that reef crest in that depth. And yeah, you'll see all the corals moving nicely. But these are the areas where I would say in the future, when the corals grow big, you will probably need some more. Sharks and reef tanks are always fascinating, and I love that. And this ledge, of course, when it comes to the design of the tank, also blocks quite a bit of the flow, and that's why actually Jens and David did that. They put the large flow cannon down here, pointing up in a 30-degree angle, so it's actually blowing the water to the top of that crest, dragging a lot of water with it, and then the other pump just opposes the flow every now and then, so you'll have this giant vortex going on right there that helps in moving all the detritus out. Also from the front you'll see a lot of corals growing nicely on the lowest end. That must be less than, I guess, 200 pars, and it's really nicely done, so the sharks have enough space to move. There's also like a dark cave in here. Yeah, and that's all going to be overgrown. I think within the next 2 years this tank will look fantastic. And as soon as the lights are all exchanged or the light color is changed, you'll see that this looks much more like a reef tank you know from home, even though it's more white than most people use right now. But in here it's more greenish, yellowish. Yeah, they would like to change that in the future to bring out the color of the corals and the fish as well. Fantastic tank, and it's coming along really well after that initial hiccup, but now it's doing well and the animals are doing well. So there's going to be more fish added over the years, but they're doing that slow, and I think that's the right way to do it. Sharks are happy, so what more can you ask for? So now I found Craig again. He's been hanging around for lunch and that conference meeting.
And I got stuck.
And you got stuck.
I was out there for a little while.
Just behind the scenes, and when we tried to open the door, that was actually the alarm that you heard. So
yeah.
That was Craig.
I was stuck.
You were stuck. All right.
This huge reef tank is a lot of fun. My favourite thing is seeing the black tips in here. And also, every now and then they get blasted by the AFC 1200 in that corner, and they just levitate from the upwelling of the flow, and that's really quite cool to see.
The size is remarkable, and I think once the coral cover is completely done, it'll look amazing.
It's only 2 years, right?
Yeah, just over 2 years. If you don't count that starting hiccup that they had with the contamination in the salt, unfortunately. Same with the stocking, as I just explained. They're stocking the tank quite slowly, which I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, there's well over 1,000 fish in there. It's just when you have a 400,000 plus litre reef tank,
yeah, well,
1,000 fish doesn't really touch the side.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's going to be the end of this video, and I hope to see you again. If you liked the video, let us know, subscribe, tell people about it, write us in the comments whether you liked it or what you didn't like. We're always reading those comments and like to know your opinion on that. And until then, I would say, see you next Saturday. Take care.